right, everybody, we're going to talk about Phillips Hall. Now, Phillips Hall is the most haunted building on campus. The original hall was built in the late 19th century with funds provided by Thomas W. Phillips, a science professor. It first served as a men's dormitory, then became a women's dormitory in 1892. Now, in 1929, it was replaced by a new hall. Now, the hall is haunted by a pale white female ghost known as Sarah. According to lore, she was a female student who hanged herself in the attic. Sarah acts like a poltergeist, turning radios on and moving objects about in the rooms of residents. Now, another ghost in Phillips Hall is a sailor who has been seen climbing up a drain pipe. Now, the story goes that he was secretly visiting a female student and fell to his death while scaling the pipe. Another version of the story says that he was a resident of the hall during its brief stint as Navy housing during World War II in the 1940s, and he was trying to sneak in and out. We're going to talk about Irvin Gymnasium, Grace Phillips Johnson Memorial Visual Arts Center right now. Now, the Irvin Gymnasium building is not the original, which was destroyed in an arson fire in 1915. A new facility was built between 1917 and 1919. Now, riots took place there after its completion when a group of student protesters occupied it. The group was objecting to the college's mandatory enrollment in Army training. Now, in 1983-1984, the gym was remodeled and renamed the Grace Phillips Johnson Memorial Visual Arts Center. Now, the ghost of Johnson, a graduate and donor, is said to reside in the building. A portrait of her hangs there, and visitors have reported that the eyes followed them as they walked around. All right, we're going to talk about Cochran Hall. An unknown ghost lurks about the first floor of Cochran Hall, recently renovated and reopened as a dormitory for 72 students. Now, the hall, built in 1910, was originally a men's residence and then faculty offices with a guest apartment in the basement. It was dedicated in 1912 to Percy Bayard Cochran, a 1900 graduate of the college and son of building founder Mark Mordecai Cochran, who graduated in 1875. Now, the father and son were two among at least 4 generations of Cochrans who have attended Bethany. The original hall was built on top of the Isaac and Sophie Stewart Ranch in Springs. After the ranch was torn down in 1909, a typhoid fever epidemic broke out. Some believed it was caused by contamination of the spring due to the demolition. Now, the identity of the ghost and why it is there are not known. All right, we're going to talk about the clock tower. Now, the clock tower is haunted by the ghost of a female student who was homesick and jumped to her death, according to lore. Now, she stands at the top of the tower, poised to jump when the clock strikes the time of her death. All right, we're going to talk about a campus haunting tradition. Now, every Halloween, Bethany College hosts ghost storytelling, and students, faculty, and residents offer their own experiences. Stories have included one about a pipe organ in a chapel lecture hall playing music by itself at night, and others about haunting phenomena in the nearby homes. That's pretty interesting, don't you think? All right, we're going to talk about Alexander Campbell Mansion. Now, Alexander Campbell built his family mansion just outside of town between 1790 and 1840. Which is a large gap, by the way. He had a large family, 14 children by 2 wives, and the house held up to 20 people at its peak capacity. It also served as a focal point for the restoration movement that Campbell led. Today, the mansion and grounds are closed to the public. Now, the ghosts of Campbell and one of his sons, Wycliffe, reportedly haunted the grounds. Now, Alexander frequents a small detached hexagonal building that served as his personal study. Now, visitors have seen his phantom form pacing the floor, as he must have done while deep in thought. Now, Wycliffe Pardon me. Wycliffe, born in 1837, tragically drowned at age 10 in nearby Buffalo Creek. He had gone swimming with two of Alexander's grandsons who were students at the college. The boy was separated from his companions and lost control in the water. And that's sad, isn't it? All right, this one here is God's Acre Cemetery. Are spirits of the dead trapped inside God's Acre Cemetery? According to local lore, some of those buried inside the walls do not rest easily. After the death of his daughter Amanda, Alexander Campbell chose a hillside slope above his mansion as the location for his family cemetery and named it God's Acre. Now, in 1866, Campbell died at age 78 and was buried there. Also interred there are his parents, his two wives, Margaret and Selina, all but one of his 14 children, other relatives, many presidents and faculty members of Bethany College, and missionaries of the Disciples of Christ. A monument to Campbell is made from Italian marble and sits on a 4,000-pound granite foundation. The inscription reads, "In memorial, Alexander Campbell, defender of the faith, once delivered to the saints, founder of Bethany College, who being dead yet speaketh by his numerous writings and holy example." Alexander's father, Thomas Campbell, is buried nearby. Now, Thomas was author of the Declaration and Address of the Christian Association of Washington County, Pennsylvania, said to be the most significant religious document written in America during the 19th century. We're going to have to look that up, y'all. After Alexander Campbell's death, a stone wall 2.5 feet thick was built around the cemetery. Now, the wall, made of hand-hewn stone blocks from a nearby grist mill on Buffalo Creek, sits 4 feet high with another 3 feet below the ground. The original purpose of the wall was to keep out grazing animals. Locals felt it gave the cemetery an eerie feeling, however, and a story arose that the spirits of the dead there were now trapped inside by the walls. Pardon me. Today, the cemetery is a popular place for people to visit for a break on a nice day. The inside can be accessed by stone steps that go up and over the wall. Some visitors say they see a strange white mist floating about inside the cemetery, especially at night. Paranormal investigators have recorded EVP voices there and captured mysterious forms in photos. That's crazy. All right, we're going to talk about Sisterville and the environs. Now, Sisterville in Tyler County was originally named Wells Landing after Charles Wells, who arrived in 1802 with his 22 children. Jesus Christ. Really? 22 children? Are you shitting me? I couldn't afford one of them little bastards. Now, he established a ferry boat, tannery, blacksmith, and lumber and flour mills, making Wells Landing a trading place on the Ohio River. Now, Wells died in 1815, left part of his estate to two of his daughters, Deborah Wells Greer and Sarah Wells McCoy. They plotted the land and named it Sistersville. Drillers struck oil here in 1891, and in just 2 years, 15,000 people had poured into town in search of their fortunes. Derricks sprouted all over town and were said to become as common as trees. Now, in 1893, there was a huge gas strike at Big Moses, producing 100 million cubic feet of gas per day, a noise that could be heard for 10 miles around. It was said to be the largest gas well ever developed in the United States. Y'all look it up. Let me know what you think. All right, we're going to talk about Wells Inn. Now, the Wells Inn at 316 Charles Street is haunted by the ghost of Ephraim Wells, the man who built the hotel in 1894 and opened it early the next year. Now, other spirits may be in residence as well. Originally, the inn was called the Wells Hotel. Ephraim Wells, the grandson of Charles Wells, built it to cater to higher class travelers during the oil boomtown day. Politicians and the social elite of the region came to town, where they wined and dined, attended the Olston Opera House, and traveled across the Ohio River by ferry. Now, the well-heeled and well-connected always stayed at the Wells Hotel, taking suites on its 3 floors that offered grand views of the mountains and the river. Now, the hotel was a jewel of Victorian architecture and splendor, with a fountain in the lobby, a banquet hall, and a bar in the basement called the Wooden Derrick Lounge. While the high society dined and slept in luxury upstairs, the oilmen, tradesmen, and rougher trade packed the basement bar. Like most hostels, the Wells had its ups and downs. When the oil boom waned, traffic thinned. The hotel changed hands a number of times through the decades and deteriorated along the way. Now, after suffering extensive damage in the harsh winter of 1993-94, the hotel was marked to be torn down. But another set of new owners acquired the building and began restoration work, adding modern amenities such as a fitness center and swimming pool. The rooms had a mix of old and new furniture, which some guests found out of character with the original structure. The Wooden Derrick Lounge closed in 2001 and was turned into a storage area. Now, the business did not prosper, however, and the hotel closed its doors around 2008 and sat empty. 2 years later, Charles and Kim Winslow bought it and initiated more renovations, giving the hotel its 4th overhaul, and then reopened it. Now, guests and staff members have told numerous ghost accounts, and the establishment has been investigated by paranormal groups. Ephraim Wells is believed to be the most prominent ghost, still keeping an eye on things. Now, the sounds of writing come from his former office on the 2nd floor. A portrait of a bearded man with a walking stick hanging in the hotel is often mistaken for Wells, but the identity of this man is unknown. Other phenomena at the hotel include phantom footsteps, odd noises at night, and the mysterious movement of objects from one location to the other. Now, the door of room 324 slams shut of its own accord and is difficult to open. In room 317, guests have reported that the bed shakes at night. The hotel is only 500 feet from railroad tracks, and train horn blasts are frequent, but they also have been known to sound when no known train is passing by. Let's explain that one. Y'all got questions? Throw them down below. Now, guests often feel invisible presences as they walk down the hallways. Sometimes the elevator operates on its own at night, running down from the 3rd floor to the 1st. The sounds of a child running down the hall have been heard in the middle of the night, though no children were staying at the hotel. The old Wooden Derrick Lounge is a center of paranormal activity, with knocking sounds on the walls and orbs floating about. So if y'all want to investigate and you're all into that paranormal investigation stuff, y'all go ahead and check it out. Let us know. The Trading Post is curious. We want to find out. All right, y'all. We're going to talk about Greenwood Cemetery. Many of Sisterville's most prominent early citizens, along with settlers and farmers, rest in Greenwood Cemetery. White apparitions have been seen floating about at night, making moaning sounds, and a certain tombstone is said to be hot to the touch. Now, the most well-known story concerns the magnificent granite monument of Philo Stocking, who moved from New York State to Wheeling, and then to Sisterville in 1841. He established a flour mill, Riverside Mills, and then built a fortune during the oil boom days. He attempted to drill the first oil well, but the tools became stuck at 525 feet, and the well was abandoned. Now, Stocking wisely retained the oil and gas rights to the land that he sold. The Stocking Monument is a tall woman bending over a stone which she once cradled, and it bears the inscription, "Blessed is he that considereth the poor. The Lord will deliver him in time of trouble. The granite woman can no longer cradle the stone because vandals broke off her arms, and it is said that now the statue seeks revenge against them. Another story about the monument holds that bad luck comes to anyone who merely touches the statue. We're going to talk about the ghost of Gamble's Run. Now, the ghost of a murdered man attempted to get justice for the crime, according to the case of John Gamble. Unlike the Greenbrier ghost, whose testimony was admitted in court, the Gamble case never went to trial. Now, John C. McEldowney Jr. told the story of the ghost of Gamble's Run, which took place near Paden City, Wetzel County, in his 1901 book, The History of Wetzel County, West Virginia. Now, McEldowney took the story from an account written by D.W. Gamble, who was 10 years old when the tragedy took place. So we can go ahead and shoot all the whatever we want to do on that one. But he was 10 years old, right? But he was there. He was present. Now, John Gamble was born in Beaver County, Pennsylvania in 1814. He became a carpenter and moved to a farm near Sardy Station, West Virginia in 1850. He traded in staves, tan bark, and wagon spokes and ferried his goods to market in a flatboat down the Ohio River to Cincinnati. He also bought and sold cattle. In addition, he harvested apples on the farm and made cider, which he transported in barrels. Now, on the afternoon of November 12, 1850, his 36th birthday, he set out in his skiff for New Martinsville to acquire more barrels for his cider. But he never came home. On his way back, he stopped at the home of the Whiteman brothers, who had purchased a wagon from Gamble and given him a note for $20. Now, Gamble asked them to cash the note, but they declined. Another man, Leb Mercer, was there at the home. He had sold Gamble a calf and was still owed $2. Now, Mercer asked Gamble for the money. Gamble produced a $5 bill, but Mercer had no change and asked Gamble if that was all he had. No, said Gamble. In fact, he had about $200. That honest admission evidently sealed his fate. It was getting dark, so Gamble announced he had to leave for home. He told Mercer to come by his place in a few days and get the $2. Mercer followed Gamble outside and watched him push out into the river in his skiff, and then went toward him. When Mercer arrived at his own home at 2 a.m., he was wet and muddy. The account offers no details of the discovery of Gamble's body, but circumstantial evidence, as well as gossip, pointed to Mercer as the guilty party. He was in possession of the $20 note that the Whiteman brothers had given Gamble as payment for the wagon. There was no hard evidence that Mercer was guilty, however, so the crime went unpunished. More than a year later, Gamble's ghost spoke up. A number of residents of New Martinsville attended a corn husking near Point Pleasant in the fall of 1851. On their return home, they decided to split up and take different routes and see who arrived first. A man named John Hinman elected to take Gamble's Run, which was named after John Gamble. He was walking along the path on the Ohio River bank when suddenly he saw the form of a man. "I am John Gamble," the figure said. "Leb Mercer killed me. Take him up and have justice done." And the ghost disappeared. Frightened, Hinman sped up. The next morning, he told others in New Martinsville what he had seen. He had never met John Gamble, but he accurately described how the man had walked and the clothes he had worn. Convinced, they had the evidence at last against Mercer. The townspeople pressed for his arrest. He was charged with first-degree murder. However, he was released because the testimony of a ghost would not stand up in court. But Mercer was guilty by popular decree and remained under a cloud. His lawyer had a difficult time preventing him from confessing his guilt. He moved to St. Mary's, where he acted strangely and muttered to himself. Now, Gamble's ghost was never seen again. All right, y'all, this one here is the Jennings Gang in Doolin Run. Now, ghosts of a gang of outlaws haunt this area of New Martinsville along the Ohio River in Wetzel County. Doolin Run was a hideout for the infamous Jennings Gang, which got its start when a Union soldier, John Jennings, went AWOL. John Jennings, a native of Monongalia County, was by some accounts an honest and decent man up until the Civil War. Now, when the war started in 1861, Jennings enlisted in the 15th West Virginia Infantry. After 6 months, he deserted and returned home, supposedly out of devotion to his wife and 9 children, but perhaps out of the fear of and distaste for combat that turned many men into deserters. Now, Jennings became a wanted man. He managed to elude capture despite persistent manhunts by the Home Guards, bands of local militia, technically. It was not without tragedy, for his wife died of exposure and exhaustion one winter while trying to carry supplies to him in his hiding place. Now, President Abraham Lincoln, alarmed by the desertion rates, gave a blanket amnesty to all deserters who returned to their regiments. John Jennings did so, but found he was an outcast. His fellow soldiers spoke to him when necessary, but otherwise they ignored and ostracized him. He was forced to camp away from the others. At war's end, he was even thrown overboard from a steamboat carrying troops home and had to walk to Doolin Run. Back home, his neighbors did not treat him any better than his fellow soldiers had. They considered him an outlaw. 3 of Jennings' 5 sons were so outraged over the treatment of their father that they started a campaign of robbing and stealing from critics and detractors. Now, one son, Little John, did not join the gang, and the 5th, William, had drowned before the gang was formed. They soon attracted others and became the Jennings Gang. Members were both men and women and included thieves, kleptomaniacs, con artists, robbers, swindlers, prostitutes, and convicted felons, and killers. It is possible that the sons, who had violent personalities, used their father as an excuse for their own outlaw inclinations. Now, Thomas Jennings, the oldest son, had joined the army during the Civil War and, like his father, had deserted at about the same time. He did not take Lincoln's offer of amnesty. He joined the gang and was arrested and imprisoned for grand larceny. After his release, he immediately resumed his activities with the gang and was again arrested and convicted of grand larceny. He was sentenced to 5 years in the West Virginia State Penitentiary in Moundsville, where he died of illness during an epidemic. Now, Frank Jennings, said to be the leader of the gang, was described as unintelligent and brutish, a daredevil who engaged in more criminal activity than any other members of the Jennings family. His activities finally landed him at the penitentiary in Moundsville to serve as a 5-year sentence. He served less than half of it before he escaped. The penitentiary is now one of West Virginia's most haunted places, and the manner of Frank's escape is worth noting. At the time, construction of the prison was not complete, and its walls was surrounded by a stockade of wood planks 16 feet high by 2 inches thick. Now, the wood had deteriorated from weather, and when a violent storm approached, prison guards feared it would come down. A group of inmates, led by Frank, planned to seize the opportunity and make a break. He told them that when the stockade fell, they must rush out, ignoring orders to stop and any shots fired by guards. Now, the men gathered outside to await the storm. The guards sensed the escape plan and congregated to keep watch on them. The storm demolished the stockade and the prisoners raced out with Frank at the head. But when the guards opened fire, all the would-be escapees halted except Frank, who kept on going. For a time, he hid in a small cabin that had a subterranean escape passage to a ravine. He was never recaptured. Jackson, or Jack, was the most violent of the sons, a problem child who grew up to be a problem adult. In the history of Wetzel County, West Virginia, 1901, John C. McEldowney Jr. described Jack as one of the most cruel and inhuman men that ever stood upon the soil of Wetzel County. Like his brothers, he was ready at any time to commit a robbery. He was less intelligent than the others and especially illiterate, without a redeeming trait about him. Jack was difficult to control and defied his father openly, even beating him. If John fought back, Jack would scream that he was being killed. Once he shot at his father, narrowly missing him. Now, the Jennings house, located between Doolin and Fishing Creeks, was the gang's headquarters. The gang terrorized people in Wetzel and Tyler counties and evaded authorities through a network of sympathizers who hid them. It is uncertain how involved John Jennings was in the gang. Now, neighbors told how he complained about his son's lawlessness and use of his home to harbor criminals. In self-defense, citizens formed their own vigilante gang in response. The Red Men, who disguised themselves by either painting their faces red or wearing red sacks over their heads. They raided gang sympathizers and burned down their houses. Now, the Red Men warned John Jennings that he must end the terror reign of his sons, but he ignored them at his own fatal peril. The end came on June 12, 1873. When the Red Men raided the Jennings home in the middle of the night, awakened by a shot probably fired at the watchdog, Jennings looked out and saw more than 20 Red Men, their faces painted red. He knew his time was up. Now, the Red Men came inside the house and ordered Jennings to surrender. He refused. They then ordered him to follow them, and again he refused. So they attempted to put a noose around his neck. He had by then remarried, and his wife handed him an axe. But the Red Men were faster and shot Jennings dead. In the fray, his wife was wounded twice by bullets. She recovered. When the news spread of their father's killing, Frank and Jack Jennings escaped south and were never seen again. The rest of the gang dispersed and went their individual ways. Now, long after, the silhouetted ghosts of the gang were seen running along Doolin Ridge. Hunters have witnessed them throughout the years, endlessly repeating their raids and escapes.